To modify this box to take the shape of a tabletop, I will need it to be thinner. I want you to be able to see the dimensions as I work, so I will move to the item panel. In case you cannot see, you can tap on N and you will be able to click on item and you'll see all these over here. So I would need to make this cube thinner, so I will click on S to scale, Z to constrain it to the Z-axis, and I think I want it to be as thick as this, and that's good. And you can manually type out the dimensions. In case you're working with real world dimensions, you can type out the dimensions over here in the panel and you can get your actual values there. Another thing I would need to do is to make it a little bit wider, because I would want to have like an array of chairs facing opposite directions and the table at the center, so it should be wide enough to be sort of like a dining table. So let's say I go to the top view by clicking on the tilde key and clicking top. So I can click on S to scale it and constrain it to the x-axis to make it a bit wider, and I think I am good with this. However, if I want to incrementally scale it using the grid lines, I can click on Control and you can see that it will snap to the grid lines. So that's another thing to note. And once I'm good with the dimension, I will click on anywhere to escape. Alright, so I think this is good. Then I want it to be a bit long, so let's go to top view, S to scale, Y to constrain it to the Y axis, and I think once it's about this size is good. So I think I like what I'm getting for the tabletop, and we can now look at adding some table legs. To do so, I would need to move the tabletop a bit to the top to increase the height, to allow the legs to be arranged just underneath the tabletop, because remember that this grid surface you're seeing here is a reference for our real world ground. So currently the tabletop is on the ground, so I can move it up a bit to get it to be a little bit higher. One thing I like to do is to use real world references, and that's why I have an add-on that I am also adding in the resources of this course, so that you can get your real world add-ons. Since we are building for virtual reality or augmented reality, we definitely need to use real world references. So to do so, I will get the real world add-on, that's the real scale references, to get the reference for the table height. Now you don't need to bother right now for setting up an add-on. I'm making a bonus video for that, so you can just take note of the height that I will set the tabletop. You can type in the values. So once I just import the references, I have this seated figure here. I can now move my tabletop just below the elbow. Before I do so, I will take note of the object selected. I can see here that I have multiple objects selected in the scene. So if I click on G, it's going to move multiple objects. So I can just click on only the tabletop. Now I will click on G and Z and move it up a bit just below the elbow, and that should be okay, about 1.277 meters. So I think I like the height, and I can delete this reference because I'm good to go for that. When adding extra features to an object, just like we discussed earlier, we would need to move into the edit mode, because in this case I do not want to start adding a new cube and editing that cube to take the shape of the legs. I can just do so with the object itself. So I will tab into edit mode and I can see the faces highlighted here, and I just need to create a subdivision of this face, because if I tap on it, you can see that it's the entire surface that is being selected. And if I were to have legs for the table at the 4 edges, I would need to have a subdivision for that area. To make sense of what I just said, I will be using the loop cut to start with, and I can just go over to this icon here that says loop cut, or as you can see, there's the shortcut Ctrl R, which I can tap on it, and once you tap on it the first time, you need to slide it to wherever you need to go. As you can see at the top left corner of the screen, it's showing you the figures for how far that edge slide is from the origin. So let's say we want the foot of the table to be this thick. We can say 0.873 is an okay thickness, and we can also add another edge slide by clicking on Ctrl R. Click on it once and go to the opposite direction. Since I know that it's 0.873, I can click on minus and it will have the same distance from the edge. So I think I'm good with this, and I can actually add another edge slide here, Ctrl R, in this direction, and once I get to this, I think 0.8591, that's good. So Ctrl R again and click on it once, slide 0.8591, minus, enter, and I think I'm good with this. The next thing I need to do now is to get the foot of the table. So to do so, I can ensure I am on face select, because currently it's on edge select. So click on 3, select the faces of the little squares that we have at the corner, and you can click on shift, hold shift and select multiple edges. And remember that the height for the table was 1.277 meters, so we'll be working with that dimension for how high the legs of the table should be from the tabletop to the ground. To extrude an object is to extend the face of the object or whatever we select, whether it's the vertices or edges, whatever we select, we can extrude it by using this button here, and we can manually work with it by dragging it. However, we can also see that clicking on E is a shortcut key to do so. So once we click on E, we can move it down, and since we have 1.277 as our calculated distance to the ground, that will be the value for the foot of the table. So I think this is a good one, and we can just exit edit mode by clicking on tab, and we have this nice table here. This is just one way to create a table because of demonstration purposes. I will show you one other way to create the foot of the table. To do so, I will just simply Ctrl Z in this case, and since we have our divided surfaces, we can add a new object to the areas that we want to place the foot of the table. Remember, we have not yet talked about this guy here. Well, this is a cursor that helps us to have a reference point to either add an object to our scene, or we can have it as a reference point for rotation, scaling, or general transformations. Now, if I were to add a new object, for example, if I wanted to have a conical table foot, I can start by adding a cylinder to start with. To do so, I'll click on Shift A, go to Mesh, and go to Cylinder. Now you can see that this cylinder spawned at the center of the world view, and this is just a way to demonstrate that any object that is added to the scene will be spawned based on the position of the cursor. I will reposition the cursor so that I can spawn my object to be at the edge of this tabletop. So let's delete that, X, delete, and we are going to use this cursor here, and we can just go to the top view and tap on any of this edge here, for example, and we can import the cylinder again. So Ctrl A, Mesh, Cylinder, and you can see here that this time the cylinder was spawned at the edge of the tabletop. So once I have that set up, I'm good to go. A shortcut for repositioning the cursor is to click on Shift and your right mouse button, and you'll be able to reposition the cursor. To recenter it, you can click on Shift C, and it will recenter the cursor to the world origin, as well as bringing the entire scene to your view. So I can now go ahead. Remember, you're currently at this cursor area, so that's why if you click, it still follow you around, but I will want my default option here to be set to the select box, then I can recenter again. So what I want to do now is to work on conical legs for the table. So let's start with resizing the leg of the table. Remember when I started talking about using the scale, and I said you can select the scale and you can constrain the scale to 2 axes, exempting 1 axis. So let's say we clicked on this blue square here. It's going to constrain the scale to both the X and Y axis, making it smaller on the X and Y axis but not smaller on the Z axis. The shortcut key for that is once you click on S to scale, you can click on Shift Z to constrain it to the X and Y axis, and you can exempt that scaling from the Z axis. So once we do that, we're good to go. So I think I like the dimension for the leg of the table, so we can now work with this. Now I would like to arrange this table foot to be on the ground. I can manually do so by changing my view to the front view of the table, where I can see the flat arrangement here, and I can toggle back to the select box icon. Then I can move my table leg by clicking on G, Z, and I can move it down. However, you can see that we still have a lot of extra surface here, so we can edit this extra surface by using the edit mode. So let me just Ctrl Z and go to edit mode by clicking on tab, and once you're on edit mode, you can go to the top surface. Let me click on the select button as the default and go to the front view, click on G, Z, and bring it down. Now we can do the same by repositioning our view to see the bottom of the leg of the table, and going back to the front view, G, Z, and let's snap it. Or we can gradually change the movement by clicking on Shift so that it will be smaller increments than the snap to grid function when we press Ctrl. So I think I like what I'm seeing here. The last thing I will talk about is the fact that since I want the shape of the leg to be conical, I can just rotate my view a bit and click on S to change that bottom dimension to have this conical table leg, and I think I like what I see. So once I'm done with that, I can tab out of edit mode and go back to the top view where I can see the entire arrangement. Now I have my table foot selected, but I do not like where it's currently positioned. I can actually switch to the wireframe view that will allow me to see through this solid tabletop here by going to the icon here that says wireframe, and this is a way to switch the viewport shading. So you can see there is the wireframe viewport shading, and we were previously on the solid viewport shading. We'll get to the remaining two later on. Now I can see the table foot directly under this tabletop, and I can reposition where I have my table foot by clicking on G. Remember, we can constrain it to the Y and X axis by clicking Shift Z, and I can now be able to reposition it. Let me do that again. G, Shift C. Good. So I want to just place it at this center here. It doesn't have to be exact, but you can, have this as your guideline for where to place your table foot. Now we want to duplicate this table foot because we don't want to keep on recreating it from scratch, from a cylinder and all. So to duplicate this, there are multiple ways to do so. You can recreate the exact same object by going to your keyboard and typing Shift D, and you have created a new object, and you can see in the outliner that it created a new object and named it table foot 001. However, this might not be an efficient way to do so, because as you can see, it has different polygons. The polygons are the faces that make up this object, and the more polygons you have in your project, the heavier the project. So we are going to duplicate this table foot by creating an instance of it without creating the new polygons itself. To create an instance of a selected object, you will just need to click on Alt D. So I will first click on Escape. I have clicked on Escape, but you can see that we still have a new object created, so I will delete that. Then I will select my table foot. You can select it through this by just clicking again to select the table foot, since it's a wireframe view, and click on Alt D. So you have actually created an instance of it, and we can now constrain the movement to the Y axis and move it to that spot there. You can also click on Control to move it incrementally, and you can have it just there. So I'm going to do the same thing. Alt D, constrain it to X axis, click on Control and Alt D, constrain it to Y axis, click on Control and snap it, and now we have the table foot all arranged there. So let's see how it looks like in the solid view. Now, if you do not want to be going to this button over here, you can click on Z and you will see the different options there, so you can just easily go to the solid view. Now I have this beautiful looking table over here, and I think I'm good to go. So we've been able to create our table, and before we go down into creating the chair, it's best practice to have all the elements that make up this table into one collection so that our project will be organized. To do so, since we have only the table in this scene, we can click on A to select everything in the scene, and we can click on M to create a new collection, and click on that new collection and name this table. So once you do so, you click on OK, and you now have all these assets into the table collection. In the outliner, if you click on the eye icon, it helps you to hide objects from the viewport. So once you do that, you're good to go, and we can now make the chair.